Our lesson of Scripture this morning comes to us from the Gospel of St. Matthew. This morning I'll be reading from chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Hear now the reading of God's holy word. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
It's the story we've all heard before. It's the story that we've all heard so many times we could just about recite it from memory. It's not anything new to say about it. What I want to do this morning is back up just a little bit and look at it from a different angle. Because what we're after, I think, in the Christmas season is to bring some of the freshness of the Christmas spirit into our lives, which is what the rebirth of Christ is all about in our hearts. How do you square the magnificence of what happened on that first Christmas and what was supposed to come up long term with the world that we see around us? If Christmas is the perfect expression of God's love, then where's the perfect outcome? To have gotten off to such a good start, God certainly seems to be taking enough time with the rest of it. And what is the rest of it? Following through to a logical conclusion what was begun at Christmas long ago. A logical conclusion. Now there's a word for you, logical. How do you rate God when it comes to logical behavior? God has a plan. God knows what God's plan is. I heard someone say one time that God goes straight by following a crooked path. The other way I've heard that put is that God writes straight with a crooked line. What does that mean? It means that here's point A where God is, here's point B where God intends to wind up. God gets there by going this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, until finally he makes a turn and gets back to point B, which was where he was headed all along. Not a logical process for us to think about. When the party concerned is God, perfect love doesn't always express itself through ways to us that are perfectly logical. If God were a quarterback, you'd never be sure what the play was. But it would work, as opposed to some of the other things that we've seen in person and on our TV during past football season. If God were a composer, his harmonies and the way he did music would be ways that had never been thought of before or considered. God might combine bluegrass and heavy metal. Can you picture Balsam Range in chains? But it would work. If God were an engineer, God would design things that nobody else had ever considered, and when they looked at the drawings and the plans, everyone would say, this will never work. But with God, it would work. That's because God's perfect love doesn't follow a path of perfect logic. Case in point, the coming of Jesus into our world wasn't born the way messiahs and princes and kings are supposed to be born. Born in a stable. And we need to remember, I'm not talking about a nice wooden stable out behind the house. I'm talking about a cave. In those days, there was a shortage of wood. It had all been cut down, and there really wasn't much wood at all in the land of Palestine. But there was plenty of rock, and there were lots of caves. And so inns were built not according to marketing surveys. It says you should put something here, here, and here. Inns were built wherever a cave was available that could serve as a stable. And you came out from the front of the cave a bit and you built the inn. Accommodations in the inn were not much to brag about. An inn consisted of 2 large rooms. One for the women, the other one for the men. And they didn't even have cots or bunk beds, just on the floor. Maybe you had some straw to settle down. An inn was no place for a woman in her 9th month, within hours of delivering a child. Mary winds up in the stable behind the inn. A lot of straw. You wonder if she goes and kind of makes a place for the family in the back of the stable, which is traditionally the place they show you in the cave where Jesus was born, which is the back of the stable. They say that for purposes of privacy, that's where Mary would have gone. What if Mary, moving the straw around, and finds bed bugs, and she says to the fellow who's working in the stable, there are bed bugs in this straw. And he says, yep, sure are. He knows all about bed bugs that have been around a long time. And she says, this is not acceptable. I want to talk to whoever's in charge. Where's the front desk? And he says to her, what's a front desk? We're talking really primitive conditions here. Actually, the innkeeper probably did Mary and Joseph a favor by offering them the privacy of the stable as opposed to a public room for sleeping where there was no privacy. The more I think about the innkeeper, the further I go in life, the more impressed I am with him as a man who really maybe understood what he was doing a lot better than we give him credit for. In Palestine, where Jesus was born, and Mary wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger. It wasn't that wooden manger that we use in all our nativities. Wooden mangers are European, they're American. But remember, there was no wood in the Holy Land in those days. And a manger was really a huge stone block. I'd like to bring one in. I think it'd be a great experience to have a worship service with this manger, pretty much like the one Jesus was laid in after his birth in front of the church. But one of them weighs about as much as a full-size pickup truck, and I'm not sure the floor would stand it, Joyce. And after all the work we've done on the building, I think better of it. A manger was about 6 feet long, about 3 feet wide, and had a lip around it about 8 inches high, about 4 inches wide, and they were hand chiseled. And you fill them with straw. And horses and cows would come up and nibble on the straw. I'm picturing Jesus lying in one of these. I had my hands on one when I went to the Holy Land. They took us to Megiddo, which was the fortress that Solomon had built overlooking the plains of Megiddo, which we call Armageddon. And Solomon had 100 chariots stationed in this fortress on top of Megiddo mountain. And you could look 15, 20 miles up and down the plains of Armageddon, and you could see an enemy coming in either direction. And Solomon could have all 100 chariots hooked up down the circular road and out on the plain within 15 minutes. It was the ancient world's rapid deployment force, cutting edge at that time. The mangers, there must have been 24 of those huge stone mangers that were about all that was left on top of the mountain. And they had them there for Solomon's horses to eat hay out of. And you could put your hands on them, and they were rough, they were ugly, primitive. There was nothing about them that was pleasing or pleasant. And Jesus, on the night of his birth, is wrapped in some cloth and laid in one of those stone mangers. As long as the tour guide would let me, I just stood there and kept running my hand across the rough places on that manger. Not much of a way to bring any child into the world, much less the one who is supposed to be the Savior of the world. But sometimes there's no understanding what God does. Love motivates strange behavior. Extreme love can motivate extremely strange behavior. I look around myself and at the world here and say, what's changed for the better since the first Christmas? Well, a lot of things have changed, and many of them for the better. But a lot hasn't changed for the better. We have explored outer space. We have explored cyberspace now. And all of a sudden, a few years ago, scientists discovered, they realized that we know nothing about the great space that's beneath the earth, beneath the oceans. That we really know less about what's in the oceans now than we do what's in outer space. And so we're trying to figure out to explore that kind of space. The space that God is concerned with is the inner space of the heart and the soul, and that is why Jesus came. And that is why God sent Jesus. Outer space, the great space under the oceans of the earth. Cyberspace, that's our domain. The inner space of the soul and spirit are the frontiers that God is concerned with. The things that were wrong when Jesus came are still the things that are mostly wrong. Bad things still happen in about the same proportion that they've always happened. If you're looking for a big difference in the way things have changed in a visible kind of way since the birth of Christ, you're really hard-pressed. This is what I make of it. We can look at Christmas as the beginning of the beginning. The beginning of God's stepping into our world, incarnate in the flesh. Not the beginning from creation, but the beginning point for God's saying, I'm going down there. I'm going to get my feet on the ground, and I'm going to involve myself in what's going on. That's the beginning of the beginning. It's when God expressed His love and stated the intention to be a part of what's happening down here. Now, Christmas doesn't necessarily mean that God's going to handle everything down here in short order, not efficiently, or expeditiously, or logically. What it means is that God has chosen to be a part of what's going on down here. How that all works out is for God to know. If Christmas is the beginning of the beginning, let's fast forward for just a second to Easter, which is the beginning of the end. Easter is where God's love expresses itself even more strongly, but in a different kind of way. There's a gentleness about the love of God come down at Christmas. Easter is different. It's not love expressed in the sending of a child. It's love expressed in the death of that child, grown to adulthood on Good Friday. And it's love expressed not only in the giving up of a child, but on Easter morning of the resurrection from the dead of that child. And it signals the dawn of a new day, the end of an old way, the beginning of the new way, and the new world that is going to come into being because God has put Himself front and center in the world we live in. The good news, and the reason we really celebrate Christmas with such enthusiasm, is that Christ is with us as much this Christmas as He was with us physically that first Christmas. That God is here to share our joy, to stand with us in the things in life that are hard, not necessarily to fix it all in short order, to make our lives simple, but to be with us in the middle of it before anything else happens, which may very well involve fixing it. That's the miracle, that the love that came down at Christmas in Jesus didn't happen just once it was over and God's on with whatever God has planned next. It is that God comes and stays by the Spirit in our lives. Not just in moments like this when we gather together as worshiping men and women, but in the places that are out there, Think of the hardest thing you may have to do in the next week or so. And think about God being right there with you. That's what Christmas is all about. That's what it means when we say that God is incarnate in Jesus Christ. That's the church's word for saying God is with us. It isn't that Christ was born. It's that Christ is born. The tense, it's never past tense. It's always present tense. And that is why wonderful things can happen in our lives, in our hearts, in our souls, that transform us and move us in the direction that we know God is going. We don't have to understand how God is going to get there. God's logic is beyond us. All we have to do is trust that no matter what it looks like to us, things will work out because God is with us and God is in it for the duration. I hope you get everything done that you think you have to get done between now and Christmas. But while that is happening, let the spirit of the season, which is the presence of Christ, be a part of whatever is going on. And that's the preacher preaching to himself as well as to each of you, because Ann's out there rolling her eyes. She knows I throw up my hands and go into a rant every once in a while when the to-do list gets to a certain point. But in my heart, I understand what it's all about. And it's a great sadness to lose sight of that in this season when peace, hope, joy, and love are present with us in our Savior. Born at Christmas, raised in glory on Easter morning.